hear us. It's great to have you with us for our promotion and tenure workshop. With me are our panelists. Ashraf Bastauros is the chair of our college promotion and tenure committee, and together with him we have Zengyi Shah, who's an associate professor of chemical and biological engineering, and Michelle Supir, who's a professor of ag and biosystems engineering. And my name is Sriram Sundararajan. I'm serving as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. Again, great to have you here. So what we'd like to do is do a quick overview of the process for the P&E, the workflow that we have here at Iowa State. And then we'll transition over to the panel, where each of them will give a brief presentation. The two faculty members, Zengyi and Michelle, will talk about their preparations and process and advice in preparing their P&T portfolio, both from assistant to associate and then associate to full. And then Ashraf, in his role as co-chair of the committee, he'll give you perspectives on what the committee has been seeing, some best practices, etc. And then we will open it up for Q&A. So hopefully we should have plenty of time for that moving forward. So thank you to those who filled the RSVP and survey. And so here's some data. So before I go to that, I was amiss in mentioning a couple of things. So I'll mention this again during Q&A. So right now the attendees are muted, and you should be able to ask questions both verbally. You'll be unmuted when the Q&A session starts, or through the Q&A feature that you see on the side of the WebEx window. And then we should be able to answer those as they come in. The second thing is this session is being recorded. Most of the information we are sharing are generic. It's not pinpointing any particular individual, and there are several faculty who are teaching at this time and who could not make it, and so we want to make sure this information is available. So I just wanted to mention that up front. And finally, I should say Dean Easterling will be joining us in a bit. He is at Provost Council, and as soon as that ends, he will join us for this session as well. So coming back to the slide. So the pre-workshop RSVP and survey had about 22 respondents as of Sunday. It's a good spectrum: 10 assistant professors, 7 associate, 3 full professors, a department chair, and 1 other, which I assume is in some support role for the P&T process. So in terms of the questions, we have about 6 folks who are planning to go up next year. And then, as you can see on that left slide, folks who are going to about 5 folks in 3 years, and then that number as it goes down, right? So you have a spectrum of people who are in various process stages of preparing their dossiers. In terms of what you'd like to hear, we got a good mix in terms of wanting to know about advancement criteria and expectations, guidance, feedback, and mentoring, and of course the nuts and bolts of dossier preparation and the process. So hopefully we'll address all of these aspects as we move through today's workshop. So I wanted to start off by simply showing you the current language as it is in the faculty handbook, which gives you the criteria that we have for advancement in the tenure track ranks, right? So for the associate professor, as you can see here, I'm just going to quote some of the key points, and then you should be able to read the rest of that. The primary criterion for advancement, of course, is excellence and scholarship, right? So when you go from the assistant to the associate level, this excellence should establish you as a significant contributor to the field or profession with the potential for national distinction. And so we can talk about later how, what constitutes meeting this particular criteria. We also want to make sure there's effectiveness in the areas of position responsibilities. So typically this is in the area of research and scholarship, the instructional, teaching, student mentoring areas, and of course, professional institutional service, whatever you would have in, as we will see in a minute, in your position responsibility statement. And we expect satisfactory institutional service. At the assistant to associate level, we don't anticipate a significant level of institutional service. You should be part of some service activity. And by institutional service, we mean across all stages of the institution. A departmental service opportunity is still an institutional service, right? It doesn't necessarily mean at the ISU level, it can be across the spectrum. And sorry, one thing is the recommendation for promotion to associate professor means that your contributions have been made in appropriate magnitude and, more importantly, quality. And there is a high likelihood that it can be sustained moving forward, right? Because the idea is that we want the trajectory to continue. In terms of full professor, the main difference now here is that the candidate should demonstrate that they have achieved national distinction in scholarship, as evident in candidates' wide recognition and contributions in their field. And then again, effectiveness in the areas of the PRS. And of course, as you move up the ranks, there's an expectation that you're now more heavily engaged in supporting different areas of institutional service, right? So your service load might be a little bit higher, and as you take on, shall we say, more not heavy, but perhaps more impactful roles with institutional service. And the recommendation for promotion to professor, it's based on the assessment of the record. And we're looking for accomplishments that have occurred since the last promotion, right? In the case of the assistant professor level, we're looking at things that you might have accumulated as you became a faculty member and you're progressing towards that promotion and tenure. Here, we're looking at things that happened since your last promotion, right? So that's an important distinction. So that's our basis in terms of the criteria as laid out in the faculty handbook. Now, I should say different departmental governance documents or college governance documents may provide some additional guidance. Typically, some departments have some more, I guess, detailed guidance on what they're looking for. And so you should pay attention to what your departmental expectations are to meet these criteria for advancement. In that context, your PRS, which is the position responsibility statement that all of you hopefully are aware of at this time. Those of you who've joined us new, you would have been introduced to this when you joined. It kind of lays out what the expectations are in terms of effort and emphasis in the different things that you're required to do as a faculty member, right? This is important. It basically states your path and it sets the context for evaluating your accomplishments in terms of magnitude and quality. Right, for most assistant professors, this is typically standard across our college. It will be something in the realm of 40% of your effort is towards research scholarship, 40% towards the instructional educational mission, and 20% in terms of service. Now, it'll fluctuate a little bit, maybe 50, 40, 10, but in general, it kind of hovers around that area. And the PRS can be quite different as you for associate professors, because there are multiple pathways to advancement to full professor once you become an associate professor. But this PRS is shared with external letter writers. It is made available to your colleagues who will be voting on the cases. The college P&T committee will be looking at it. So it's the basis in terms of evaluating your accomplishment. So it's important that it's accurate. And especially for those of you in the associate ranks, you want to make sure it accurately reflects the proportions that you're participating in. And as you might be aware, the appropriate time to do that is during your annual review as a conversation with your department chair. So it's kind of a two-way process. Both your chair and you have to kind of work towards changing your PRS. And so just I encourage you to pay attention to it and make sure it is appropriately reflective of your activities, especially at the associate level. So in a nutshell, if you want to look at the advancement process, so there's 3 stages, if you will. Most of the action kind of happens initially at the department level, then comes to the college or the dean's office level, and then goes on to senior administration, right? So initially, you're going to complete your dossier, and we'll talk about what all goes into the dossier. And then external letters are solicited and added to the dossier. And then you're the faculty in the department who are eligible to vote. There's usually a committee that will review, make a recommendation to the faculty and the chair. And then the faculty will vote on the case. And then the department chair will then write an evaluative letter making a recommendation on the advancement decision to the dean. Right? So then this entire dossier then comes on to the college. I will note that where you see this asterisk here, I just encourage you to look at your department governance, because there's a slight variability in the details from department to department, but in general, this is what happens. And you should probably look at what that process is in your department. And the other thing I'd like to highlight is the steps here, which are in red, and hopefully most of you can see the red. Every time your dossier advances from one level, say in this case, department to the college, you as a candidate will be told what that recommendation or decision is. So there's a communication that keeps you saying, okay, this is what we've recommended as it goes on to the next stage. Then at the college level, we have a college P&T committee that has a representative from each of the departments. So they get together, they look at this entire dossier here, and they make an independent recommendation of the advancement decision. Again, a recommendation to the dean. In addition, the dean has an advisory committee that comprises of the associate deans. For our college, currently, we have three. I serve as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. Dr. Arun Somani serves as Associate Dean for Research, and Dr. Sri Sridharan serves as Interim Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives. So currently, this team will also look at the dossier, the recommendations from the P&T committee, and we kind of make a recommendation to the dean as well. So the dean then takes all these recommendations together, he evaluates the dossier as well, and he writes an evaluative letter and recommendation to the provost. At which point, you as a candidate will also be told what the dean's recommendation is. And then it goes on to the senior vice president and provost, and they will review the dossier with whatever process they have, make a recommendation to the president, and then the president makes a decision that is to be ratified by the Board of Regents. And that's when you get your official decision. Hopefully it all went well, and you have now been advanced to the next stage. So the typical timeline for that final decision is somewhere in the March, April timeframe. So this whole process takes pretty much a good chunk of the academic year. You'd start in summer, preparing your dossier, etc. The department action happens in fall, college is late fall, and then senior administration level happens in spring, now as we speak. That gives you an idea, hopefully, of what that overall advancement process is. I do want to make a couple of quick points on some parlance here. So at Iowa State, we use the term mandatory and non-mandatory quite a bit. So mandatory means cases that go up on a prescribed timeline. So typically the assistant to associate professor timeline it happens in the 6th year. At the end of the 5th year, you prepare your dossier. And so that is an example of mandatory. In some cases, we have associate professors who have been hired without tenure, and they might have a timeline by which they are supposed to prepare a dossier, and the decision is made regarding tenure. So again, something that has a prescriptive timeline is called mandatory, and mandatory cases go all the way to the president, right? Even if there is a negative decision somewhere in the middle or negative recommendation, it has to go all the way, right? Now, the other cases are non-mandatory. And so this means they are not on a prescribed timeline. So examples of non-mandatory are early cases. So we know there's a finite time clock for assistant to associate. At Iowa State, if all the criteria are met, you don't have to wait that much. Again, so that's a conversation you have with the department. And we have had cases that go up earlier than that prescribed timeline. And so that would be a non-mandatory case. And also there is no prescribed timeline for going up from associate to full. And so those would be typically non-mandatory, right? Now, in the case of non-mandatory cases, if a department is not supportive, they may decide not to forward it. Similarly, if the dean's office is not supportive, the dean is not supportive, it need not go on, right? So it doesn't go all the way through the administrative decision process the way a mandatory case does. So those are some nuances and differences. And I'll be happy to answer any questions related to this in the Q&A. But I just want to put this up because you will hear these terms here and there. I also want to remind that ISU is extremely supportive of work-life balance, and we have policies supporting tenure clock extensions for the arrival adoption of children and other extenuating circumstances. Typically, there's a process for this. It's approved by the department, college, and provost office, but you can get extensions. One thing I will note, which sometimes is a source of confusion, if you ask for an extension, what that does, especially for those on the assistant professor rank, if you ask for an extension and it's approved, your mandatory year is now pushed back. Typically, it's a 1-year extension. It gets pushed back by a year, right? And so that the mandatory time is now shifted. And oftentimes in the past, people have asked, okay, what if I then decide I didn't need that extra year, I'm ready to go. If you're ready to go, department supportive, you're ready to go. But by definition, it becomes a non-mandatory case because your timing is now different. So there's a nuance there. There's been multiple questions about this in the past, and I'm happy to answer if you have any later in the Q&A. And given the pandemic, I would note that the university made allowances for faculty to request a tenure clock extension due to the impact of COVID. And as of now, this it was made available for faculty who were in rank as of spring 2020. And I think there are some discussions about folks who joined after that, but right now the extension is for people who've been in rank as of spring 2020. As a quick summary, from 2016-17 to 2021, here is a quick snapshot of the cases that have gone through the college. We've got about 63 cases that have come to the dean's office. And you can see promotion to professor. This is from associate to professor who already tenured, have 19 yes and 2 no. Then promotion to associate professor with tenure. These are the assistant to associate track. About 30 have gone up yes and 1 no. And then we have had non-mandatory cases of associate professor, which means these are the assistant professors who went up quote unquote early. So we've had 8 cases. 6 were supported. 2 were not supported at the dean's level. In those cases, we have a conversation with the faculty, and in both those cases, they withdrew the cases, right? So they took it back and they didn't want it to go up further. So that's what that asterisk means. And then we've had 3 cases of tenure as associate professors. These are associate professors who were hired without tenure, and there was a tenure decision to be made. And so we had 3 of those. So you can see the percentages are pretty healthy. At ISU and in the college, we make an effort to hire you and support you to be successful. And so these numbers kind of bear that out. And again, if there are questions later, I'll be happy to answer. Okay. So in terms of the advancement materials, all the templates, the college has a template for the materials, and they're found in this website here that's listed. As I said, this session is being recorded. These slides will be made available on our website, and so you'll have access to this. But so essentially, the critical documents that you as a candidate have to be concerned about are the vita or the CV, then the faculty portfolio. Both of these have college templates on that website that you will use. And there's something called a factual summary document, right? So this is an internal document that basically highlights all the numerics of your accomplishments. How many students you graduated, how many courses you taught, how many papers you published, how many talks you gave, and so on and so forth. So the idea is to get all the quantitative numbers in one place, so everybody agrees in your review process what those numbers are. It's in one place, right? And then the department will add things like peer evaluation of teaching, your external letters, and the committee and chair letters, right? So you are responsible in kind of creating these first 3, and then the process takes over after that. Okay, so let me see, I'm gonna, okay, one thing is you're gonna submit your dossier. We all know that sometimes there are papers pending, there are grants pending, and something happens after you've submitted your dossier. You got a new grant in, you got a new paper, you got a student graduated, right? And you may want to update that dossier, and that's good because it kind of augments your accomplishments in some way. So I just wanted to comment that we do allow updates to the dossier as while it's in process. There is a template to report this because we want to make sure it looks clean and professional when you submit an update. And I'm not kidding. We've had somebody just submit a updated Word document with track changes on, right? Kind of looks messy all over the place. So we said, okay, let's create a format. So there is a template for this as well on the website. The way this works is you submit the update document to your chair. Chair will forward it on to the dean's office, and we forward it on to the provost's office. So that's just in terms of making sure things don't get missed and it's legitimate updates, things like that. There are 2 windows for this. Updates can be submitted in the Jan first week, which will be just ahead of when the dean submits their recommendation to the provost's office. So any updates that come in will be taken into account. And similarly, there's another one March first week, which will be just before the provost's office makes its recommendations on to the president. So again, these windows are designed so that any updates have bearing on the recommendation / decision that's being made at that level. Okay. So
Sriram, I think you muted yourself.
Thank you. I didn't realize I muted. Thanks. Okay, let's see. Hopefully you're able to. Okay. Can you see the Vita document, Heather? Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm just going to quickly go over the template document because it'll take, and then we can come back to this as needed. The Vita is pretty straightforward. It has sections that you can fill. Background, scholarship, teaching and student mentoring.
Is it possible to expand your view?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. They're good?
Yep.
Is that better? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the Vita is pretty straightforward. I'm going to spend more time on the portfolio document, if you will. So the bottom line is please use these templates because if you don't use the templates, it makes things difficult because people are seeing things in a consistent fashion, and it helps if you use the template, right? The more important thing is the portfolio document, which is your narrative, right? So the first page of this template just tells you what it's for. This is where you're going to build your case, build your story of how you're meeting the criteria for advancement. So this is a critical document because not everybody is in your research field. Everybody can look at numerics very easily, saying how many papers you have, etc. But we are very interested in knowing the impact of your work. And that will be different for every person. And so this is where you help articulate that. Okay. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the organization. There is an upfront section of synopsis. The idea is you provide an integrative summary of what you've done up to this point in your career and at Iowa State, right? It ties everything together. And then the second section is in keeping with the criteria, demonstration of excellence in scholarship and impact. So you have some sections here talking about your scholarship. And then section 3 is effectiveness in the areas of responsibility, right? This is a little bit different from the previous section. I'm going to draw your attention to 3A, where we would like you to articulate your role in collaborative efforts, right? Collaborative research is strongly encouraged, but we would like to know what you bring to that collaboration. So use this section for that. And then again, areas of responsibility, there's research, creative activities, teaching and student mentoring. This is where you could talk about, we are required to provide information on scores of teaching effectiveness, your peer evaluations, any feedback that you've got from that, and then your institutional professional service. And especially if you have things related to the diversity, equity, inclusion space, department leadership activities, whatever that might be, it can come under this section D as well, right? So again, very briefly, this document is critical. It's laid out so that you can talk about how you're meeting the criteria for advancement, and you have to use it to your advantage. Okay. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking. So I think the panelists have some critical information to share and perspectives from their journey going through this process. So without further ado, I turn it over to them, And first, we'll start with Professor Zhengyi Shao from Chemical and Biological Engineering.
Siriam, can I share my window?
Yes. So, Heather, if you could make Zhengyi the presenter.
Yep, she should have the ability now.
So it asked me to open system preference. I did not, the share button is still gray.
Say again, sorry.
The share button is still gray. I can't really click it.
Okay, why didn't you redo one thing? So, Zhengyi, I don't believe you've sent me your slides yet. Why don't you send it to me?
Okay, I can share.
I'll ask Michelle to go ahead of you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Heather, if you could make Michelle the presenter. So we'll start with Professor Michelle Soupier, and she'll talk about her journey going from the associate to the full rank.
All right, thank you, Sriram. Hey everyone, I'm Michelle Soupier, and I just want to say that the content that I'm sharing today is based upon a couple of different sources. Amy Kalita put together a presentation for CALS, and so I am using some of her slides, also some of my experiences, and also what I've seen in serving in the PTRC committee in the ABE department. So I thought I would start with my case as far as back to when I first earned tenure, which was in 2013. And at that time, I really did spend a lot of time thinking and reflecting as far as where I wanted to go next with my career. I felt like it was a rat race, just trying to get the things done that I needed to do in order to achieve tenure. And then after that, I thought I had the chance to relax a little bit and think about which direction I wanted to and take my career. And I have to admit that I really needed to think about the direction of my research portfolio. I'd been out of my PhD for about 6 years at that point, and I realized that a lot of my skills were beginning to get a little bit outdated. You know, the things that I learned in the lab as a PhD student were no longer the hot new thing, and I really needed to either update those skills or find new collaborators that could bring kind of novel things to the work that I was already doing. And so I guess the advice that I have is take that time to kind of reflect and be intentional in the decisions that you're going to make. So as far as the research program went, I reached out to some new collaborators. I found that junior faculty are really fantastic to work with. They have those new skills, and so I partnered with several people and really was able to take my research in a new direction while I was an associate professor. The other thing that I needed to do was to find some opportunities to increase my service. So I really wanted to do some more impactful work both in my department and in the colleges. ABE is split between the College of Engineering and the College of Ag. And so in my annual review with Steve Michelson, we had some conversations about, you know, what I could do. I was added to a few new committees. And one area that many of you know that I have a lot of interest in is serving in diversity and inclusion. And so I was assigned to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee right after I received tenure. A few years later, I was asked to chair the committee, and that's when I really felt like I was able to start making an impact and showing some leadership in that area. Beyond that, I volunteered to chair the Diversity and Inclusion Committee in the College of Agriculture, and then in 2019, I was asked to serve as the Equity Advisor for the College of Engineering. I've also done some work with the Research Committee in ABE. So again, around 2016, I was asked to serve as the chair as an ad hoc committee to develop the research portion of the ABE strategic plan. And from that, I was able to gain additional experience, and now I'm the associate chair for research and extension. So again, thinking about the areas that you'd like to focus your experience and build your portfolio, and then making intentional decisions in order to move your career in that direction. And also take this opportunity to prioritize the things that you really want to do. Okay, so how to prepare. These are just some tips, but as you start to put your portfolio together, think about the main message that you would like to convey and how you can illustrate those. So what kind of tables and figures do you want to make to be able to interpret your narrative? We always think about the CV as like the details, and then the portfolio is your chance to frame it and tell your story. Make your portfolio drive those messages home. Make sure you are honest, but also this is not the time to be completely modest, right? You want to emphasize your contributions and the points that you have made. So here's some bits of the PRS and some of the underlying messages that you may wish to communicate. So what is your strength in teaching? I help my students learn. I respond to feedback to improve. In extension and outreach, I engage stakeholder knowledge, and that results in changes in practices. In research, my contributions have impact, and I'm continuing to build that impact. In service, I'm a contributing participant in a few meaningful service activities. So those are some ways that you can frame the different sections of your PRS. Sriram referred to this a little bit, but within the PRS, you may need to adjust that in conversation with your chair in order to reflect your efforts. So for example, I now have a administrative appointment because of my role as associate chair and also as the equity advisor. I have a lower teaching assignment, although my course load is pretty much stayed the same. I also have a slightly higher research appointment. And so you can work with your chair to accurately reflect what your contributions are in those different areas. So here are some examples. I will say these are not from my portfolio, but I thought they were really nice, and I think they tell the story a little bit better than my own examples do. But first of all, the important thing is the trajectory. Show that you are building your portfolio, that it started, during your time as a PhD, as a postdoc, and that you've continued that positive trajectory through your years at Iowa State University. So this person was hired in 2003, and you can see publications in those first few years were primarily based upon PhD work. After that, the publications from work at Iowa State start to come out, and it's also nice to see this done cumulatively so you can see that real positive trajectory. Here's another one that is from a colleague's portfolio, and this shows the cumulative funding. So this is actually pre-2009, so that was as an assistant professor, and then the 2009 to 2017 period was as associate professor. And some things to point out here. I'm curious if those of you who are watching also noticed this, but there's kind of a flat period here, right? Not a whole lot of new external funding was obtained between 2009 and 2013. And I did review this package and can say that there was a very thoughtful assessment of what was happening during this time. There were also a clear definition of some strategies that were taken during that period. And you can see after that, the research funding just really took off. And so those strategies were very effective. And then that person was successfully promoted to professor. Here's another example of teaching evaluations. And so here on the y-axis is the student evaluation of instruction. The line shows the ABE departmental averages, and then the squares, triangles, crosses, circles are the teaching evaluations that were received by the instructor. And so here's the point. All the white space might seem like a waste, but actually that was the point. Look how high these numbers are. Maybe your teaching has not gone exactly that well. Mine certainly has not. Maybe it looks something more like this. And so you can see that while in this case the scores are below the departmental average, there is a positive trend. And so in that case, use the portfolio to describe the continuous education, the strategies that you've engaged in order to try and improve those teaching scores, and to show that positive trend with time. I think that's just as impactful. Okay, so only had a couple minutes, but those are just some ideas. But summary, start storyboarding early. Make intentional decisions to build your portfolio, especially after you achieve tenure. You have the opportunity to reflect and refocus your efforts, and take the time to do that. Engage with your mentors, find ways to work with them, and also to work with junior faculty. In my opinion, that's a really amazing way to build a research program and build new collaborations. Look at different ways to quantify and document your impact. There's examples that you can use. You can reach out to your peers, and different people use very different ways to tell their story. Some people focus on different areas of the PRS, and so find colleagues who may have a similar story as you and use their examples to help you build your portfolio. Also, just having served on the PTRC committee many times, give yourself zero tolerance for sloppiness in the final product. Just take the time to put your best effort forward, use best grammar. Your committee wants to support your case and move it forward and send it out to external reviewers. And we definitely want to put your best case forward. So make sure that it's ready to go when you send it to the committee. And then also just take that feedback that you receive seriously. People are taking the time to give it to you and they want to help you improve. And so find opportunities to incorporate that feedback and improve your portfolio. So that's all I have. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Michelle. There's a question in the Q&A which I thought we'll bring up now. One is there's a question about how we address changing PRS statements over the years. So hopefully it's not changing on a year-to-year basis continuously. If you've had a couple of changes, I think it's okay to talk about it upfront, saying that how the PRS might have changed and how anything that you might have done would have impacted your efforts in different areas, right? So typically what happens is, in most cases, the dossier will have all the PRSs, right? So people will be seeing if it is changing. And it often helps if you in your narrative upfront, you talk about what that impact has been on what you have been doing. So I don't know if others want to weigh in on that question, but that's my response. Others, please chime in. Yeah. Yeah, please do send in questions. We'll try to address it as in real time as we can. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Zhengyi Shao. So Michelle, if you could make her the presenter. I'm sorry, Heather, if you could make her the presenter.
Yep. Can you guys see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Just let me change my. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for Cerium to organize this workshop. So I'd like to share some tips for preparing my tenure portfolio. And some of them might be just specific to my field and department. And when you prepare your portfolio, so you need to communicate with your PNT committee chair and your department chair to assess whether this is suitable for your case or not. The first tip I want to share with you is to effectively utilize figures and tables to summarize your research and teaching activity. The purpose is to simplify the job of your audience. Right, they are busy. They do not want to read lengthy paragraphs. Most of the time, the figures and tables can tell a lot of story. So in the portfolio, the first page asks us to self-assess and accomplishment and then the impact of our scholarship. So in my portfolio, I provide this synopsis of my research activity. From this figure, you can see even an audience who does not be familiar with my area, he or she can probably understand my research is at the interface of this biocatalysis, functional genomics, metabolic engineering, and synthetic biology, at this interface of these 4 research areas. And then I also developed these 4 to 5 research themes, and they are interconnected. So I use the arrow to show their relation, right? Under each theme, after this figure, is the region we need to summarize the details information, like what kinds of research you develop in the course of your tenure. So I summarize the let's say some writing about like my research, right? This is for my letter writers, right? And then under this, I also summarize the group member who contribute to this research activity, and then the funding support, and as well as the publications. So they can easily extract the information under each research theme, right? And then, so at the very last of this research questions, I also prepare a small table, a small figure summarizing the course of my citation increasements over the course of my tenure, showing the positive trajectory of my research impact. And the second tip I'd like to share with you is if your PRS is composed of 45% research, 45% teaching, and 10% service, you will be asked for what kinds of collaboration you developed in the past few years, right? So having a collaboration with the ISU faculty and the external persons will demonstrate the impact of your group of research, which will be positively reviewed in the tenure evaluation. However, one important thing is to avoid ambiguity for this kind of a question. So there could be questions related with what are these projects, right? Related projects, and who are the collaborators, whether they are internal or external, whether they are come from U.S. institution or foreign countries, and who found this collaboration. And more importantly, what are your specific contribution, right, in these kinds of activity? Are you the leading, serving a leading role, or you are just a contributor? And then also equally important thing is what are the deliverable out of these projects? So for this section, I prepared this table to summarizing all these activity. For example, the first one, so I collaborated with several people in SABRE and ISU. So some of them provided chemistry, electrochemistry, and the material science expertise, which I don't have. So I clearly wrote, right, the expertise I provide to this collaboration is metabolic engineering and the synthetic biology. So in the third column here, okay? Because I'm a experimentalist, so in the second collaboration showing here, I have to collaborate with someone with a modeling skill. So at least who they are, which institute they come from, and then in the role of my job, so I clearly wrote, I initiated the collaboration with a computational biologist, right? And then this kind of collaboration lead to multiple projects, lead to multiple proposal submission. And I also list the number of published paper, and then the ones I serve as the leading corresponding authors on, right? So like with this small table, your audience can easily see your contribution, right, for individual collaboration, and then who are your collaborators and their expertise. So they come from a wide variety of research direction, and then some of them are international. So this is also a way to show your impact of the research for like at a broader scope. And also they provide this complementary expertise with your research, right? And then finally, the number of publications. So all these collaboration activity are productive since you have quite a few papers spin off from each direction, okay? In my portfolio, I also have this small table summarizing my students' achievement. It only occupies a small area of my document, so you have more space to talk about other important aspects. But clearly, this kind of I would say this table will clearly tell your audience, right? You as a mentor, right? What is the other product? Per product is your student, right? What are their achievements? For each award, what does it mean for each award, right? How competitive they are. So I have this table to summarize my mentor activities. Of that, okay. And also to make your letter writer job easier, I also include highlights under each subsection. For example, so under just in front of my list of publications, I have this highlights indicating how many paper I published since joining ISU. And then if you have some important papers you want to talk about, so there's some information we can put it in the highlight, right? And then your H-index. So just make them, and anyway, in their letter writing, right, they have to summarize this, right, using their word, but you already provide some summarizing information for them. So make them to have a pretty pleasant review process when looking at your portfolio. And then the other example is just before listing my presentations in the CV. So I also have this highlight showing like how many invited seminar at US Institute and how many of them are, just come from overseas in collaborators. So have these kinds of summarizing information ready for any people who really who need to get the specific information, just make their job easier. And then the last tip I'd like to share is all this information I share today is not only come from myself. So ask your department colleagues to share their portfolios. So a lot of tips are given to me by them. So the person who went up to have tenure 1 year ahead of me, so kindly share his portfolio. So look at his, I try to polish more and adding my specific items into the portfolio. And I also share my portfolio with the person who go after me. So with these kinds of constructive effort, right, your portfolio will probably you don't have a big problems in your document anymore, right? Because it's checked by many people for many rounds. I think I will stop here. And then if you guys have the question, I'd like to answer at the very end. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhengyi. So just a couple of things. That tabular format that Zhengyi showed is actually an exemplar that we have put on the website. So we strongly encourage those of you preparing dossiers to use that format because as Zhengyi mentioned, it does convey your role in collaborative efforts quite clearly, and it helps the review process quite well. The second thing is in terms of asking your colleagues to share their portfolios. I think it's a great idea. In addition to that, the Provost's office maintains examples of portfolios that have gone through the process. You can contact the Provost's office and get access to those to take a look as well. So I just wanted to mention that. So Heather, if you could give access to Ashraf now. Next we have Professor Bastavros, who's co-chair of the College P&T Committee. He can share perspectives from the committee.
Wonderful, thank you, Sriram. So I'd like to spend a few minutes of how we evaluate the case within the College P&T Committee. And remember that our grading rubric is, at the end, is a pass-fail. So some cases will be an outstanding or good or fair or maybe weak. But at the end of the day, we take all of that into account and we try to judge, is this case worthy for promotion or not? Let me divide it to steps, how we really look into each of the PRS content and how we evaluate it. So the first part, we look into the measure of research performance and outcome. And we try first to evaluate where does the candidate stand in the community. And standing as a community, we assess it first and foremost from the reviewer letters, because they are experts in the field and they will speak about where does this candidate, is the work original, not original, have engineering scientific aspect or more applied, give very thorough evaluation of the contribution of the candidate. Tied to that would be the numerical numbers, which is the number of publications, each index and citation. But all of those will be normalized within each field, because those numbers, you cannot take them as face value. And typically, we get those information from two sources. As the reviewers will mention that, or the department chair will be providing norms for the field. What is expected as number of publication for a theoretician versus a numerical person versus an experimentalist. And what is expected in those fields, what is expected norms. And we have pretty well established criterions for all of that within the community, within the committee, sorry. We also look quite strongly about internal and external awards. How is really this work is valued within the community, within Iowa State and outside Iowa State. A very key issue is invited lectures, invited talks, and really how is the work is published or spread around. So that is just to give standing or how we feel about the candidate, how he or she stands in the community. Second would be product, which will be more quantitative. PhD and master production, publications, and all its variety between books, papers, proceedings based on the field. Then we look at sustained performance. Is there a sustained performance and continued growth? And especially like typically for assistant to associate, it is cumulative and it is building process, but associate to full, we look very critically about, is there a persistent growth? And it is not just 1 year, the candidate got a big grant and got a little bit of activity, but before that it was dormant. So we like to see continued and persistent growth. Then we look very carefully about, is there potential for growth for the candidate? Meaning, is the area very narrow and focused, or the candidate has breadth and depth in their research portfolio, with more idea to be generated, more breadth, more collaboration, more activities. And then we look very carefully about level and diversity of internal and external contacts in grants. Is the candidate really trying to get from multiple sources, or just focused in particular type? So that summarizes how we look on the research portfolio. When we move to teaching portfolio, we look at accomplishments in teaching. And accomplishment, really, we try to see how many curriculum was developed or modified or amended. Then diversity of teaching, was there an introductory level or senior level undergraduates? And then specialized graduate curriculum. Is the candidate providing or really developing activities both at the undergraduate and graduate level? So this is like the accomplishment first, or what has been done. Then we look at, is the candidate effective in their performance in teaching? And that will come as students and peer review. And we look really closely on what the students are really saying about the candidate, and if there is some comment, and what is the peer review? And if there is a shortfall, which might happen, how was it addressed? And was there an improvement after that or not? Then we look at student mentoring, both undergraduate and graduate. Then we look also at, is this activity supported by some awards in teaching? So really look at the cumulative effort that has been done under teaching. Then after that, we go into measure of outreach of the candidate performance. And outreach will be, did the candidate participate in conferences? Did he or she try to organize many symposia within large conferences? Or is he or she are participating in the technical committee track within the community? Then is there more outreach to industry and K-12 outreach activities? So that is really the items we look for or we try to see. And it is quite interesting, if someone has a lot of activity within the technical committee, within their research community, immediately it will be parallel to that this candidate has a lot of publication, a lot of presentation within these conferences. So it is all tied together, and as an outcome, there will be a lot of student involvement and so forth. So it is really an integrated process, not one that you look at it in individual or isolated item. And after we finish all of that, we look, are this effort commensurate to the PRS level of commitment? So if someone has a lot of administrative, then is the research and outreach activities within the right level or far beyond or far exceed the expected value? So this is about the type of matrices and discussions that goes within the committee when we are deliberating on cases. And at the end of the day, let me remind you, is not a graded scale, it is cumulative. Then we see, is it appropriate or inappropriate to pass this case? So I think this is all what I want to cover, and I would welcome any question during the Q&A session.
Thank you, Ashraf. Just a couple of things. So in terms of the products that we were talking about, of course, there's a spectrum depending upon your field. It could be journal publications, it could be conference proceedings, things like patents, etc. All those things are under the product portfolio. And then the examples provided here are just that, examples, right? So each person has areas that they participate in and activities that they participate in. again, the narrative that you build is extremely important. So articulating these things like Ashraf is talking about is extremely important.
Definitely. I mean, there is no like someone who might be writing a lot of papers, technical papers, or more conference proceeding based on the field. But let me highlight something here is that numbers doesn't matter, quality matters. So don't expect that you'll be publishing tons of paper in second or third grade journal and it would be fulfillment here. No, it is the technical contribution to the field. And then to be clear that if a case that comes with tons of publication and subpar journals, actually that doesn't cut it. To the contrary, it hurts the candidate more. So really, I mean, while we care about number, but quality is the most important issue in what you're doing at the right level.
Thank you. So Heather, could you mind making me the presenter again? And actually, we've kind of reached the point where we'd like to invite folks to ask questions. Again, as a reminder, Heather, I don't know if you can unmute the audience at this point. You can ask a question directly. You can send it in the Q&A, and I'll moderate it to the best of my ability. So we do have a question here. Do all the letters about external letter writers, do all the letters have to come from full professors from peer institutions? So I'll take a stab at it. So essentially, we do want letter writers from peer and peer plus institutions as a general rule. Now there are cases of faculty who are not at peer plus institutions who are at the forefront of their field, right? So that's certainly a possibility, but the majority of your letters should come from peer plus institutions. We've had some letters come from things like folks from national labs, etc. It is important that they are well-known, recognized folks in their field. In fact, the department has to provide a small, there's a small section where they talk about, why this letter writer was chosen, what their qualifications are. So that should help with that. So other than that, I think in general, yeah, full professors are good. There have been cases where you can get letters from folks who are at the associate level because they're writing a letter for somebody who's going from assistant to associate. But for the most part, they come from full professors. I don't know if that answers your question. And Ashraf, please feel free to provide.
At associate professor, if someone is writing at the associate professor rank, that will put some doubt. And also, I mean, we wouldn't accept more than one letter per institution unless it is just a big center where everyone's there. So we need like a diversified opinion about the candidate.
Yeah, and I can tell in the recent in conversations that I've gone through, the stature of the folks writing letters matters a lot. So pay attention to that. And for those of you who might not be familiar, usually as a candidate, you can, we typically have 6 letters in the dossier, external letters, and up to 3 come from recommendations from the candidate, and the 3 are identified by the committee or the department, so complementary, so you do get a spectrum. Let's see. Other questions?
Shriram, did you see the one I sent you in the chat?
Yes, okay. Can external potential reviewers be from international institutions? Yes, we do have, again, international institutions, national labs, kind of non-academic entities. All that is fine as long as it's a smaller number of letters. So if you had all your letters from non-academic places, that might raise a flag. If you had a good chunk of your letters coming from international institutions, that might raise a flag, right? So, but having people at the forefront of their field, having 1 or 2 letters from those agencies, yeah. I think that's good.
Thank you for highlighting by saying 1 or 2 letters. That is the tolerance accepted.
So some of these guidance is also coming all the way from the provost office. So around May, they hold a debrief about the PNT process. Right. And this is typically the guidance they give, right? So these are questions that get asked at that level as well. What should the makeup of what can the makeup of the letters be? So it's pretty consistent.
Shriram, can I chime in here?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, sir.
So my comment on that has always been, obviously the question I think was, as a candidate, if you wanted to put, when you put your list together and you put someone from an international institution, you should have some confidence that they understand the USP&T process, right? And that's not always the case, right? I've seen letters that are written from a perspective that it's clear they don't necessarily understand it. So I would suggest that before you put someone from an international institution, you're confident that they kind of understand our processes and what they're being asked to write about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so then, okay, there's another question. Okay, how do we address semesters where our PRS is 90% research due to reduced teaching load, maternity leave? So in the remember when you are writing your dossier, you are being evaluated over the cumulative years in which you are trying to build up your accomplishments and career, right? So I think that's how you should view it. I don't think the expectation is that you address every small blip. We are looking at trends overall, and I think Ashraf can weigh in as well, right? So if you look at it, I don't think you need to address each and every detail. We're looking like an overall trend of productivity and sustained growth, right? Remember, each person's area is different, so what that trajectory of growth will be exactly is slightly different. But I don't know if that answers your question. So essentially what you want to be doing is if something has happened that seems to imply there are stretches of times where things have been challenging or difficult in some area of your PRS, be it scholarship, be it teaching, then you want to be able to address what might have caused it, what are the steps that have been taken to address it. But I think a blip here and there, I don't think it's needed. You're required to address that. But again, I'll let Ashraf weigh in from the committees, and others, if on the panel, please do chime in as needed.
Two things. If, for example, for research activity, we want to see consistent growth in research spread on multiple years, especially for non-traditional associate professor. But if we find like just dormant, and only 1 or 2 years, that doesn't present a trend. Same things in teaching. If there is someone with a low teaching score, that is fine, but is there a persistent effort to raise it? And is there a trajectory of raising or some sustained effort, like taking courses or participating in workshops, educational workshops, and so forth, to try to remedy that? As long as there is activity and persistent or a keen effort to improve it, that's all what we look for. But the absolute number is not an issue. Just trends. The trend is like continued growth.
So the next question we have is, what are the guidelines for making updates to the dossier in the fall semester? So so there is a window to make the updates. So let me just show you real quick here. If you can see this, let me expand this. So as I mentioned before, around the first week of January is when you can make a set of consolidate updates. There is a format. I'm just showing you what that looks like. It just says, okay, here is a section. This is what I said in my dossier. For example, if you have articles under review, you might have listed something under review. Now it's been accepted, right? So you would just say, here's the update. This was what I originally put in there. This has now been published. Here is the updated citation, whatever it is. So you can make that list. And then you submit it to your department chair, and the department chair submits it to the dean's office, right? So that's how you would submit the update. You have a window in January first week to do it. And then, like I said, you have another window in March first week. The reason we have these windows is because you might have multiple updates coming in, right? So the final decision from the dean's office goes roughly around mid-January. So this allows you to consolidate any significant updates into a single document, and you submit it all in one shot. Otherwise, in the past, things have come in piecemeal. People will keep on sending updates when they have one paper published. When they have this, so it's very difficult to keep track, and there's a good chance we'll miss something in that process. And this seems to be a more efficient and more impactful way to do it, where you have meaningful updates. So hopefully that answered that question.
So Sriram, just to emphasize what you said, This is a separate document with an update. This is
That-
not updating your dossier and resubmitting your whole dossier. It's a standalone update document that might be a page or two.
That's correct. So it is a separate document. Whatever you submit, so the rationale is we need to see the dossier that your external reviewers saw, right? So we need to know what that context is. Any changes that happened after that comes as a separate update document. That's correct. Can we address impacts from COVID without taking the COVID extension? Yes, you can. You're not the option to take the COVID extension is an option. If you've not already had this conversation with your department chair, you should, so that you can come to the best decision that is possible. That is for your particular case. So yeah, I mean, you can talk about how that how it has impacted any of your areas of responsibility. But again, that option is available. So just to be clear, the university has made this option available. All you got to do is request it. There is no justification per se for those who were in rank as of spring 2020, right? So the short answer to that question is yes. But again, I encourage you to have that conversation with your chair and see if taking that extension is something that you should consider. Okay, has there been okay, has there been talk in COE about the state legislation regarding tenure?
You want me to field that, Sriram?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, and to be sure, questions around the bill that was there to eliminate tenure. There are other bills related to higher ed. The elimination of tenure bill failed. In fact, it wasn't even really put forward for a vote, as the way the Iowa legislature works. You know, this is annoying. It's distressing. I think it does us harm nationally when there are articles in the Chronicle of Higher Education about this and what's happening in the state of Iowa. We understand all those things. I will tell you from the beginning, you know, President Winterstein and other senior leaders were working hard behind the scenes. You know, I know sometimes we want to, and I didn't really see much of it. There was maybe one or two here or there, but I don't know that I saw any op-ed pieces from Iowa State faculty, which is probably better in this context. We worked behind the scenes, and businesses understand the implication of making a change like that and making Iowa State, as well as the other region institutions, a less desirable place for faculty to come, and therefore they're not going to be able to work with industry. So there was a very strong effort and a very, I think, concerted effort behind the scenes, not only among the senior leaders, but also our key partners and allies in the state. You know, some of the other legislation is we could debate whether it's necessary or not. There'll no doubt be something, I think, that lands in the end around the First Amendment. I would just simply say that it's not inconsistent with our policy. In fact, a lot of language in this bill was taken from, you know, Iowa State policies and the approach that we're following. So again, I get the angst and the distress it causes. And so the simple answer to your question, there was certainly a lot of talk among not only Provost Council and the senior leaders and the senior leadership within the college. So glad that it ended where it did.
So I know there have been several questions about external letters, etc. So I wonder if the panel could share what their thoughts and efforts were on you know, what activities did you do that could build that network so that you have a good cadre of external letter writers that you can draw upon.
You have a slide on that. Can I share my screen again?
Yeah. Heather, could you make him the presenter, please?
Okay, so is it shared? Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, great. So there is so many things you can do along the way to really increase your network of colleagues. And one of them, when you go to a meeting, please spend the time to socialize with your colleagues. And what I mean by socialize, meaning after your presentation, stand there and talk to the people that attended your seminar or presentation and talk more about your research and research portfolio. So that is, you are the best PR of your work. That is why you go for a conference presentation. So don't just step out of the room once you finish your presentation and begin. Then in the banquet, try to get to know the senior personnel or senior scholars in your field and introduce yourself with a short introduction of what you do. Then take a very proactive approach within Iowa State when there is a seminar speakers that come. It doesn't matter, it has to be in your department. Like expand and attend other departmental seminars between chemical, aerospace, material science, mechanical, civil, and see who is relevant to your area, introduce or ask them to come and visit your lab while they are at Iowa State. Be proactive and act as a host for departmental seminar. You act as a host, you go and pick the speaker from the airport, then you have about 45 minutes of uninterrupted discussion in your car to talk about your research and activity. And believe me, this is the best time where people get to know you personally, get to know your research, get to know a lot about your activity. Promote yourself to go and in a departmental seminars in our regional schools. Just call your colleagues at Illinois, at Northwestern, at Minnesota, in Lincoln, Nebraska. Just go say, I'll be passing by. Is there an opportunity I can come and present my work to your department? So try to be more proactive in showing and talking about your work that others, and you get to more people to know about you and about your research. So this is like a couple of short synopses that I think are very effective of getting people, especially senior people, to know your work. Thank you.
Michelle or Zengi, do you have any personal anecdotes to share or other things to augment here?
Yeah, I guess in addition to that, I agree, see how you can engage with your colleagues at conferences. Another thing I found effective was to volunteer to serve on committees. So take some leadership roles within your organization. And also, if you meet someone at a conference, try to follow up with them, whether or not it's with email or pitch an idea for a collaboration. Some people that I have met at conferences have really turned into long-term collaborators just because of those first conversations. And then, as you get to know more people, you get to know their peer networks as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I personally attended a lot of conferences, and just like try to social with your colleagues in the community. And also it not only really provide them some context for your tenure letter writing, it also benefit your publication. And then in turn later, it will benefit your tenure evaluation. Because once you somehow impress the field by your project, by your result, right? And then sometimes in terms of publication, right? Sometimes it's hard to say, no, you are at a boundary, whether they can give you major revision or decline, right? They know you set up this personal relationship. They will give you a chance to revise your manuscript. And then like later, it will benefit all your subsequent, all the kind of evaluation.
That's correct.
So one of the questions we got in the pre-workshop survey was, how do you account for your accomplishments that you may have done at another institution? Some of you may have joined after having had rank at another institution and you're joining us. So in general, yes, you want to talk about your accomplishments since your last promotion. So for those of you in the associate professors, since you last got promoted, it may be at another institution to begin with. Or if you've joined as an assistant professor and you've spent some years as an assistant professor at another institution, you may want to talk about the accomplishments, but definitely emphasize what you have done here at ISU. Right? One of the things that we try to look for is, remember, every institution has its culture, has its unique strengths and challenges. So we would like to see your accomplishments in the different areas of your responsibilities here at ISU, right? This is not to say that you don't talk about your accomplishments at other places. Just find that balance. It is okay to address them. You do have to talk it. They are your accomplishments. They don't belong to somebody else. So definitely talk about it, but highlight and be clear what is at another institution and what is here. You don't want to, the worst thing you can do is mislead somebody into thinking that it was done here or there, right? So as long as you're clear about that, I think that'll be helpful. Ashraf, any comments there? I know we've seen some cases that have accomplishments in other places. So
definitely we look at a faculty as a whole. Like we look at their contribution to the field, including all the periods they spend at ISU and outside ISU. So for example, if you are talking about like a set of publication or funding, so we take it as what is the whole contribution within the period. But at the same time, we try to see when they came to Iowa State, are they continue and progressing and producing students? One of the key issues really become a challenge is graduating students. So for example, a faculty was assistant or associate professor somewhere else, have several PhD already either on track or graduated. Once they come to Iowa State to produce another PhD to graduations, that is another 5 years or 4 years. So we really, this one become more soft, and we look, is there like during the, from last promotion till today, was there enough number of graduate students were graduating at ISU as well as outside? So we look really at the whole product portfolio of the candidate when they are coming at each stage.
So there's a question, sorry, did somebody? There's a question in the Q&A. Is it typically viewed as appropriate to include research, teaching, mentoring activities, and awards that we may have received as a postdoc or PhD student in the P&T document? It's kind of related to the question we just discussed. I think you can talk about it, but be sure that you are talking about it as accomplishments prior to you starting here at ISU, right? Again, you want your narrative can include that. You can lay the foundation saying that's where you're coming from, and then talk about the accomplishments that you've had here at ISU as well. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm happy to follow up as needed. So maybe Zengi and Michelle, in the portfolios that you've prepared, how did you approach this particular aspect? How did you balance highlighting your accomplishments prior to starting as a faculty member at ISU?
I think I did not really include anything in my PhD and the postdoc activity, because I remember my chair clearly asked me if you are still collaborating with your previous advisor, probably it's not a good idea. So I specifically did not really collaborate with him in terms of any paperwork. Right. I think now after you get your tenure, probably it's a good idea if there is need, you can continue with resume the original collaboration. But I mean, for the maybe pre-tenure that period, it's important to show your independency. Right. And I think if after a number of years, once you show your independency, then you can come back to really set up all the necessary collaboration, but don't really heavily rely on that. Or if you already have, that's good, right? But don't really spend more than, let's say, 20% of your your papers talking about this, right? Because it's important to show your independency.
May I just comment short statement here? Just to be clear, if you have some product with your PhD advisor or postdoc advisor, better finish them, but don't start new collaboration with him or her. Like it is, if there is a product that need to be published, I actually, it is encouraged that you finish publication, then you start to show your independence. But don't leave hanging fruits without harvesting them.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I think it is more impactful to discuss awards that you receive once you've joined Iowa State. So something in our annual review, we discuss with our chair any awards that we would like to be nominated for, and kind of help to find those opportunities to promote our faculty. And so I don't remember when I went up from assistant to associate really mentioning much from my PhD, except perhaps the publications that came out of that work, and maybe some early grants that I worked on as a PhD student were probably listed on my CV, but probably not discussed in much detail.
Right.
Maybe a related thing is here, I think many people mentioned already, they want to see your positive trajectory, right? If you were a rising star as a graduate student or postdoc, you started as a very high position, but maybe as assistant professor, the first 3 years, you don't have time to publish paper yet. So they will see a negative slope. That might not be a good sign, right? So that's why we don't really highlight significantly about your previous experience in your graduate school and then postdoc period.
I think it's go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, I don't want to, obviously these are key members of the process responding here, and I don't want to disagree with them, but I would simply offer that this idea of working with your PhD advisor. I think there's a question in the chat about former PhD students. You're kind of on the other side of the fence now, but let's focus on the PhD advisor. I think the key word is showing independence, right? If you've got 10 papers and 8 of them are with your advisor, then people are going to question your independence.
Exactly.
If you happen to have, I don't know, maybe make up 30 papers, those 8 look to be less of a problem. So it's not an on-off switch. You have to really, the key question is, are you and have you established independence? I would actually argue that it's hard to sort of turn off that relationship and then come back to it 6 years later. And you may be missing key opportunities. And so again, focus on the independence part of which I think everybody was consistent in, but I would suggest that you don't want to just, turn it all off automatically, right?
Right.
So remember, you're like a lawyer building your case of how your accomplishments are, right? So if there's something you did as a student or postdoc that has laid the foundations or groundwork to things happening here at ISU, talk about that, right? But I would agree that you should focus on the activities that you've done at ISU a little bit more. And in terms of the collaborations with former advisors, etc., that's exactly right. You need to demonstrate independence, right? So I mean, we've had a case where that's been asked quite a bit, and so there had to be additional information, had to be clear that there was a unique need, a unique experimental capability that was here that needed to continue. So that independence aspect, though, is still paramount. It's important. Your external reviews are going to look for it, right? Because that's in the academic world, that is something people are looking for, to see that you're establishing your own program. And quote unquote, for whether it's fair or not, you're not riding on the coattails of your advisor, right? So okay, so I think same thing. Former PhD students, same thing. If you have collaborations before, the question they're going to ask is how much of it is being driven by you versus being driven by somebody else. So as long as you're able to address that, I think you should put that in the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a question about how persuasive are alt metrics and non-traditional measures of scholarly impact. I think overall we're looking holistically as an individual and the impact that they're making. Right? There are traditional measures and metrics. I'm going to share a slide here real quick that gives you an idea of the ranges that we see, but each case is considered on its own merit. Although we do look at multiple cases in a year, the PNT process evaluation is unique to that individual, right? We're looking at the context of that particular individual. It is not a comparison saying, hey, this person accomplished this much, for this person has not. Right. And so it is pretty unique. So I don't know if that answers the question, or maybe if we want to have a discussion about that, we can. Ashraf, yes.
Yes, we also, like for non-traditional, some cases we look at patents. And some cases we look at published program codes, as well as published short articles in societies. But primarily, like the ones that weight heavily, if someone has a lot of published program codes that people are using it, as well as if someone has more applied direction and a lot of patents are coming out. All of those are evidence of a scholarship on their own. So it is not only technical publications or like technical papers and conference proceedings. Other products are considered heavily in each individual cases. So it is all individuals, and every candidate should articulate their strengths, their contribution to the community. And we look at finally, how did this candidate shape his or her community in whatever aspects he managed to do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've had examples of faculty showing their impact through product development, new products being developed, new companies being started, software being adopted by entities. So there are. That's why the narrative is important, right? You can't just rely on numbers and things like that. You have to describe these things and articulate them. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you can share, see this now. So what we've tried to do is there are what we call traditional measures, right? So we look at numbers being engineered. So what I'm showing here is what I would call ranges of selected quantitative measures. So what we've done is taken information from the factual summary documents that people have submitted as part of their dossiers. This is for the last 5 cycles, the 63 cases that I showed you before. So it's over that. We've broken it up from assistant professors and associate professors on the top and bottom. And so the first row in each case shows you the typical numbers that we tend to see with respect to research and scholarship. And the second row is related to student mentoring and number of courses taught, right? So the point we're trying to make here is there is a range. We often get asked, hey, how many papers do I need? How many products do I need? How many students do I need? How many dollars do I need? And the answer we often give is we have never set a minimum requirement as a college, because these numbers vary quite a bit with respect to the field you're in, the work that you do. A theoretician doesn't need lots of dollars to produce impactful work. I'm an experimentalist, and I used to have, I have 2 atomic force microscopes. They're not cheap to maintain, so I better be getting some stuff to keep those things going, right? So it changes quite a bit. So the goal here is to just give you an idea that there is a range. There is no single metric or bar that we are asking you to clear. You have to articulate the impact of your work, and you have to talk about what it is with respect in your particular subfield, right? And so we do have people who are flying really high. I remember, I'm serving the dean's office now, but I remember being a faculty member submitting a dossier, and I'm looking at these cases thinking, oh, there's no way. There is no way. I hope they're not looking at my dossier now at this point, right? But there are people who perform really well in terms of the traditional metrics, and some people, you can see the numbers are on the other end. So there's a whole spectrum here. So the bottom line is, you want to be having a conversation with your department chair in terms of what you are doing to sustain and grow your research program. We want to show that you're success. We want to see that you're producing scholarship of high quality, right? You got to articulate that. There is impact in your work, and we've talked about these traditional measures like H-index. We've talked about other impacts in the question that we just tried to answer before. We've talked about how to talk about your efforts in the teaching space, addressing any issues that you might have had, talking about exemplary contributions there. The other thing we'd like to see is that you have at the assistant level a PhD student who's very close to graduate. We want to see that you can mentor a student to graduation in the system here at Iowa State, right? As you can see in the assistant professor level, when you put your dossier, maybe you have a student who's just passed a preliminary exam. They're going to graduate, they're not graduate, but you are progressing them towards graduation. Ideally, we'd like to see a PhD student graduate. That might be the only metric per se that we'd like to strive towards. But again, it's a journey. Hopefully you're pushing students through the system. And again, I'm going to just let you read the numbers here. The point we're trying to make is that there is a range. There is no bar per se. Dean Easterling, I don't know if you wanted to add a few words here.
I would, and basically it's just to really emphasize what you said, Sriram. And we could present this in a little different way, right? We could show in each of these categories, the minimum value and call it minimum, and the maximum value. And I've done this in my previous academic life, right? And what I always would stress is there's no one named minimum and there's no one named maximum, right? So these are individuals over a 5-year period, right? You can rest assured that no one was successful having all the minimum entries, right? It just gives you some sense of that there's just distribution. And behind every one of these cases is a story, right? That we don't share for reasons of confidentiality. So when you look at, sometimes you look at really, high numbers, right? They may get your attention and say, oh my gosh, how was there that many papers, or how was there that much research? It's field dependent. Perhaps the individual was working in a national lab before they stepped into the role at Iowa State, and where they were doing had lots of scholarship. So the point is, pay attention to your department, and even within the department, the individual fields sometimes vary. And Sriram has already mentioned that whether you're an experimentalist or more on the analytical side in terms of what you need, the money in and of itself is not important. It's what you do with the money, right? And how you support students and your scholarship, et cetera. So I think this information is valuable, but I would also encourage you to remember that it really represents a conglomerate of many, many cases, and don't get concerned one way or the other about particular numbers.
Thank you, Sam. Let's see. Okay. I know we're at time. I didn't notice the time. So we are at 3:30. So I know all of you are busy. Thank you for everything that you're doing in this unique time with the pandemic. Good luck with the rest of the semester. If you still have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And as I said, we'd post this on the website so that if you have colleagues who've missed it, they can see it as well. So again, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the panel and Dean Easterling. And good luck, everybody, for the rest of the semester.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you, Sriram.
Thank you.